Warren Buffett, Jennifer Lopez, Bill Gates, Anne Hathaway. What do they all have in common? They're rich. Obviously, they're famous. They're all middle children. Middleborns have somewhat of a reputation. Boring. But turns out they also have critical skills and they are going extinct. You might have heard some buzz about this trend because this article recently got put out by The Cut. It's titled, "The Extinction of the Middle Child. They're becoming an American rarity just when America could use them most." It documents how fertility trends have essentially reversed since the 1970s, when 40% of women were having 4 or more children. Today, nearly 2/3 of women have either 1 or 2 children. You do the math very quickly, no middle child. Why does that matter? The Cut explains it this way, quote, "Not the lionized firstborn, adored and groomed to succeed, and not the coddled lastborn, the baby of the family who benefits from inexhaustible attention and experienced parents. No, the middle child is just that, the middle, excluded, forgotten, shoved into the role of de facto peacemaker among squabbling kinfolk, stripped rudely at an early age of the privileged status as the youngest, and taught instead to accept benign indifference from siblings, parents, and the world." Benign indifference. Yeah, a lot of us who experience this kind of resonate with that, right? So before we get to why this trend could be problematic for all of us as a society, let's start with this. Does birth order even matter? Depends on who you ask.
It's a question psychologists have been debating for decades. Does your birth order determine your personality? First, the theory. In the early 1900s, Alfred Adler, an Austrian psychotherapist, was one of the first to theorize about the impact of birth order. He believed it was directly linked to personality. Here's how. Starting with firstborns. Think Michael J. Fox on Family Ties. The oldest sibling is said to be ambitious, responsible, controlling. They might strike you as leaders of the pack or mini adults.
Well, Dad, I was thinking, term papers and exams come and go, but the family unit is the one true constant in life.
They were the first, and they got time alone with mom and dad before all the others came along. Next, you have the middle child. These kids learn to make their mark. They're sometimes described as people pleasers, rebellious, peacemakers. They're hodgepodge, like Lisa Simpson.
"I'm not sad. I'm inspired. That's why I volunteered this afternoon."
What?
"The mission leaves in 10 years. I'll be 18, and I'm going to Mars."
In the middle spot, like Lisa or Carlton. Kids can experience the so-called middle child syndrome, just feeling somewhat forgotten. Parents tend to dote on the youngest, and they give the oldest more responsibility, so middle children have to forge their own paths. That brings us to the babies of the family.
Guess what? Politeness week is over.
The youngest, like Michelle Tanner, they know how to get what they want. Manipulative, self-centered, sometimes attention-seeking, but they can also be described as simplistic and uncomplicated. One more potential, only children. Mature, diligent, leaders. Doogie Howser was an only child, and in TV land, he was a doctor at age 14.
Oh, I get it. It's the old trot the boy genius out to impress the guests routine, huh? I don't think so.
You might have realized these theories apply more to a traditional family, not today's modern family.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Yeah!
Those kicks were fast as lightning.
Yeah!
Blended families, those with adopted children, so many factors can change the whole dynamic. Plus, there are skeptics. Not everyone agrees that birth order determines who you are, and we really couldn't find that much evidence to back it up. In 2015, a massive study published in the Journal of Research and Personality looked at 377,000 high school students. Here's what they found. Yes, firstborns tend to have a higher IQ, but only about 1 point. And in terms of overall difference between firstborns and lateborns, the differences were so small, they weren't even considered relevant. And the sibling dynamic is shifting fast. A study by Pew Research finds in 1971, most Americans thought 3 children was the ideal number. Fast forward to 2014, that number is down to 2. No middle child. So keep blaming the firstborn in your family for being bossy and the baby for being lazy. But science and social trends still leave a lot of questions unanswered in the birth order debate.
Like I said, not everyone is on board with the theory of birth order. If you ask someone like my mom, who had 4 kids, she'd say it is the gospel. Many people are believers that fewer middle children could actually have consequences on the dynamics of society, on business, on politics. So I wanted to get more. I spoke with Adam Sternberg. He's the author of that article for The Cut, and he had some thoughts on the virtues of the forgotten sibling.
What is it about this position that needs so much attention?
There's a real movement to think about middle children a little bit differently than we have traditionally, because if you think of characters like Jan Brady from the Brady Bunch, who was always complaining about how Marcia, her older sister, got all the attention. But psychologists now are saying that, these qualities can actually be real positives. It's been shown that the oldest child will tend to follow in the footsteps of the parents because there's a lot of expectation on the oldest child. Whereas the middle child is freed up a little bit to take a risk or to start out in a new industry, or middle children tend to go more prevalently into sort of creative pursuits and things like that. So it really just depends on how you look at it, but there can be a lot of really liberating things about being a middle.
If we think of a middle child sitting in a boardroom, would they be sitting on the board as a junior staffer, as the CEO? What can they bring to those sorts of settings?
I think if you think of the middle, they're probably not the CEO. CEOs are disproportionately firstborn kids. And they're probably not the one who's standing up and demanding a raise, because that sounds like a youngest born. They're the one who's in the middle trying to make peace between the two. They also might be the person who kind of goes off on their own to pursue a special project that they really believe in, because middleborns do tend to be sort of private. And they also tend to be drawn to working on their own, partly because they're given the space to go off and do their own thing. So it might be that person in the office who's sort of off in the corner doing something, and they're going to surprise you with some great new idea.
You mentioned that Donald Trump is middleborn.
He is a middle child, but he's a particular situation because there was an older brother in the family, but he died prematurely. And often in that situation, psychologists believe the middle child will sort of step up and try to get that parental attention that was denied to them initially. An interesting parallel, and you can draw what conclusion you like. Richard Nixon also was in the same situation. He had an older brother who died young, and then he sort of stepped up to become the sort of de facto oldest child. And certainly seems like there might be some parallels between those two figures.
You talk about how on the Supreme Court, those who are oldest or only children tend to be more conservative, whereas those who are in the middle tend to be more consensus makers or liberal. So someone like Brett Kavanaugh, you have to kind of wonder, how does this factor in?
I was very struck by the fact that there are no youngest children on the Supreme Court currently. There have been in the past, but it does track with what we understand about the tendencies of oldest kids, that they tend to be overachievers and they tend to go into sort of established fields, that they might go into law and then one day end up on the Supreme Court. But it does make you think that, we maybe could use another middle child or two on the court right now just to mediate, which becomes so polarized. It would be nice to have a little bit more of a balance.